Welcome, sisters. This is Jonita D'souza, and I am with my dear sister, Sama Morningstar, and I will open up this conversation with heartfelt gratitude for having this sister in my life and watching, witnessing, and co-creating since the last few years with what she's doing and the work of the Divine Feminine that we are weaving together. I feel really, really called to bring in Sama and discuss something about womb rage. We are right now in these times where people are raging. There is rage. It is present. It is so present that we can no longer ignore or sugarcoat it. And this is why I felt intuitively guided to reach out to Sama and have this discussion where we can break the, what do you say? Maybe whatever inhibition we have regarding this dense emotion that we carry, all those, nice girl syndrome and things that we've been conditioned to be. And Sama is one lady that I know who has been working with doing the womb work with a lot of authenticity and a lot of vulnerability and a lot of rawness, which makes it really real for everyday women to relate to. So Sama, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Jonita. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss because it really does get so mixed up and twisted in our with all those things that you said. So thank you for inviting me and thinking of me for this conversation.
So Sama, I will connect Sama's link and work below and the bio as well. And those of you who are part of this community, maybe you have already known Sama because we've been in each other's community, sisterhood, co-creating and weaving each other's work in our own ways. So for those of you interested to know more about Sama's work, there will be links below this video. Let's talk about Sama, womb rage. I know when we met in London, we even talked about your experience of the dragon pulsing and the emotions that came up. And I still remember those conversations because it was something that I was experiencing in that moment as well. So you work a lot with women and womb. So is there a womb rage? Let's begin from there.
Oh, well, of course there is. I mean, if you look at the evolution of humanity, okay, we started out with pre-patriarchal, matrifocal, womb reverential societies because small tribes and villages, because it was considered to be this amazing miracle that women could produce a new life. And there were all kinds of other powers that women developed, and the women were the priestesses and the leaders and the wise women of the community, and that was recognized and revered.
Yeah.
Okay. And some say that I've often asked, why did we go down this horrible patriarchal path where we've been just like denigrating and abusing the womb instead of revering it and trying to control the womb and, suppress and oppress women and all this for so long? How could this possibly be adaptive or healthy? It's just suppressing the very thing that promotes new life in our bodies, new human lives, but also new life and vitality for individuals in our bodies and for all of society. How could we possibly have, so I've asked this question many times, and the best theory I've seen is that there was some big cataclysm that sort of shocked everybody out of that nice womb bliss place, right? Because there's womb bliss of when the womb is revered and when women are supported to do what we do best, and not just having babies, but being this pulsation of vitality for the community. When that's supported, there's womb bliss, and everyone experiences that womb bliss, right? Well, when this cataclysm came, you know, an asteroid hitting the planet, the axis tilting, no longer food year-round available, people going crazy because of the trauma, having to protect themselves, and all of this, there was what happens with a big trauma like that is that there can be separations in the brain, so that the logical thinking brain and the feminine brain separate from themselves. And so that's what we're suffering from, is a collective long-term trauma response that we haven't recovered from. And that's what patriarchy is. And if you've worked with trauma, you know that when somebody is traumatized, they will continue to perpetuate that same trauma state until they can somatically release and return to wellness and well-being. And so that's what humanity is struggling to find, and that's why so many people are talking about trauma recovery and all of that. And a big part, and so of course, that going from being revered to being abused and denigrated, of course there's womb rage. Like, here is our womb, our individual womb and our collective womb that just wants to nurture life and perpetuate life and has all of this love and this compassion to give, and is being squashed and squashed and squashed and abused and abused and abused. Even if it's not, even if it's just the baseline, even if you have the best possible life with no acute womb trauma, you're still living in a society that doesn't give the womb the reverence that it's due.
Yeah.
And so, yes, of course there's womb rage.
Yeah. And I know that for so many of us women, and this was my story as well in the past, that expressing that anger is a very difficult thing. Like, to that extent that many of us begin to believe that it doesn't even exist. Like, okay, it's okay, we're fine. Yeah, we've had difficult times, we've had betrayals, we've had resentment and all of those feelings, but we carry on with our daily chores, we carry on living, we carry on doing the personal development work, and we still do not acknowledge or don't know how to acknowledge this, the anger, the suppression, the rage. And I know for me, it was working with the dark feminine energies for a really long time that finally I was able to express it in a way that I do not get afraid of, you know. So I want to ask about your experience of maybe personal or the women that you work with. How often do you see this? Or how common is it for you to witness the denial of its existence?
Well, you know, for me, that was a big thing. And that was a big part of my healing process, like central, like step number one in my healing process, to even admit that I ever got angry. And the reason for that, and for most women, is that it's not safe. It wasn't safe when I was growing up. If I expressed anger, well, first of all, I saw my mom expressing anger with my dad and the violence that ensued. Okay? So then as a small child, it wasn't safe for me to express any feelings like that, because my dad's anger would get bigger and violent immediately. So I learned very early on to appease, to put my feelings aside for my own survival and the survival of my mother, to appease the other, especially the masculine. And I learned that from my other female family members. My grandmother, you know, was very good at appeasing. Now, this didn't mean that she never got angry. The way she got angry, though, was through passive-aggressive remarks and judgment and criticism and nagging. Nagging to get what she wanted and to try to control people that way. And the anger was there, but it was really under the surface. No, she would never admit that she was angry.
Mm.
My mother tried to express herself more and wasn't as good at that other thing as my grandmother was, because she probably saw how that didn't really work. She wanted to express herself, but that didn't work with my father either, because they would just get into these screaming matches, you know. So she tried to, but she was letting out, it's like all these cats were in the bag, okay, for generations of women where it wasn't safe for them to express their anger and feel how they felt. And my mom tried to let the cats out of the bag, and it was a mess. You know, generally. And so we store that in our bodies when we don't allow natural. Anger is a natural emotion. In fact, it's a very healthy emotion to feel. It helps us to feel strongly enough about something that's not working for us in our lives, that needs to be changed or transformed, and it generates the energy for us to and motivation to make those changes and take those risks and ask for what we want and face whatever's holding us back. And without that energy, if we're suppressing that energy, then we're suppressing our momentum and our creative fire.
I know that.
You know?
I remember that for me, I always felt guilty after expressing my anger. So I would run to the bathroom and I lock myself and I will cry. So that's how I used to express my anger, because I didn't want to be seen as this angry woman, you know. Especially being here in India, the personification of women is the nice looking object, you know. And so for me, it was mostly the feeling of guilt after every time I have expressed my anger towards my loved ones or for something that I did not like. It made me feel guilty, and it took me really years of peeling those layers of, you know, understanding that that guilt is not even mine. Can we talk about this underlying shame and fear and guilt? For our reasons to deny anger.
Well, you know, anger is about something that we want or need, an unmet need,
Yes.
or something that somebody else is doing that is harmful to us that we want to stop. Right? Mm-hmm. And we're taught from a very young age, from in our mother's womb, with our mothers feeling this way, that it's not okay for us as women to ask for what we want or to insist that abusive behavior towards us stop. That's not okay. That our whole, we're taught, there's this heavy programming for women everywhere around the world, that our whole purpose in being alive is to please others, and to make sure everyone else is happy. And so if someone else is not meeting a need that we have, or we have a desire for something from someone and they're not meeting it for us, or if someone else is actually behaving harmfully towards us and we get angry, that anger demands change.
Yes.
And that anger demands other people to accommodate us. And that flies in the face of this programming that we're supposed to only accommodate everyone else and never ask for our needs and desires and well-being to be accommodated. And so that guilt, that shame about getting angry is just that society told you you're not supposed to want anything, and makes you feel guilty for that. And I call BS, big fat BS on that.
Of course. Yeah.
And that's why feminine anger is so frightening, because it is powerful and it can implement change. Like, imagine if we got angry about things, and this is happening a lot in the world right now, where people are just like, enough is enough, and allowing that energy, of that powerful energy of the anger, to take a stand and to create change. Yeah. And, you know, at the beginning, before we hit the record button, you were mentioning talking to people about it who were saying, you shouldn't talk about this. You don't want to trigger more stuff. Right? There's already enough right? But the thing is, but what I want to say about that is, if we approach this anger that we have it inside of us proactively, and start to let it out, and this is part of the work that I do, the somatic self-healing work. I do womb dance and womb-centered yoga with lots of breathing and sounding and like this. If we allow that stored up backpack of anger that we have from all the times that we didn't ask for what we wanted, we didn't stand up for ourselves, we betrayed ourselves, because there's that level of anger, and at ourselves, and then all the times that somebody else didn't listen to us when we did ask for what we wanted, and somebody else betrayed us and told us one thing and did a different thing. All the times that we never let ourselves feel that anger and it got stored in our body. If we don't let that out, we get up to here. And that's when every little thing makes us explode all over uncontrollably on people. And that's another source of the guilt and shame, is that oftentimes we're up to here of all the things that happened to us and our mother and our grandmother and our great-grandmother. And we're up to here, and one word in the wrong tone from a loved one that they didn't even mean anything by, and we're all over their business with anger, right?
Especially during our moon cycle.
Exactly, especially if we've been neglecting our own needs around our menstrual cycle for so long, because we never learned how to take care of our own needs. And it just gets up to here, and then when we're that sensitive and we don't give ourselves that time away or retreat and we're not tending to it, we're not taking care of it, we're not giving ourselves the time we need to process all those feelings and release them from the body so that we can have clarity and utilize that energy, like have that anger energy become a resource to us that fuels our purpose and our creativity. Because once we release it from the body with these practices that I do all the time, a bunch of different wonderful things happen. One, you're not so trigger happy, right? You're not spilling out with outrageous anger every time some little thing happens. Okay, so then you're able to think more clearly. If something is happening that you are angry about, you can actually be current about this if you've released everything from the past. Or if you're in the process of releasing from the past, then you can also start to feel, oh, gosh, I'm really angry about this. Is this all about this current thing, that dirty sock that my husband left on the floor? Does that dirty sock merit this much anger? Well, maybe it merits a bunch of it, because that's just one of the dirty socks that he's been leaving on the floor in all the years that we've been together, even though I've asked him to put his dirty socks in the laundry basket, right? And why should I have to ask him to do that in the first place? Why do, all those things. Yeah, so yeah, but is it only about that? The dirty sock issue? Or is it about all the other angers like that I never let come out of my body? And then it gets too big, and so if we're letting it out, then we can be clear and present and current with the current thing and have an appropriate amount of energy about that thing. And then when we have an appropriate amount of energy, then we can have an effective conversation that doesn't have to be guilty,
What I have witnessed in my dark feminine retreats is when we go through this womb process of releasing the anger, or first of all activating the anger and then releasing. After that process, one of the biggest revelations and experience that women have is the experience of a deep self-trust. It's like there has been a tiny dot or tiny hole somewhere that we have not a doubt that we have not been there for ourselves, and that's a major part of our womb rage or our anger that is suppressed, and we kind of polish it to be our external circumstances, in relation to people and situations and stuff. So what I have noticed is it's a very beautiful experience of women coming back to the safety and the trust in their own body, with which they are no longer afraid of being hurt, because we are angry because most of the times we don't want to be hurt, so we just express our anger, and we deny a process of recognition of the current, as you say, what is actually current. And
Yeah.
So Sama, could you share a little bit also about how does this show up in our day-to-day life? Like, how does this unexpressed anger shows up?
Well, the unexpressed anger shows up, for me, it would show up in the habits of my family, which was to never admit that you're angry, but instead have, you're making, when you're talking about something, there's this passive aggressive quality. Like there's a tone, and there's a tone, like, for example, say I was upset because we didn't start right when we said we were going to start today, which I really wasn't, but let's pretend, just to demonstrate, okay? Then I might, and it's kind of hard for me to try and produce a comment to demonstrate this, but I might have said, "Oh, no problem, Jonita, it's fine."
That's what you said.
but I said it on the text, so you didn't see. And so you can feel, even though I haven't said anything critical of Jonita, I'm telling her that it's fine. You can tell by the energy that I'm really upset.
Yeah.
And then if she says, "Are you upset?" "Oh, no, not upset. No, it's fine. Really, it's fine." Right? And you can tell the difference when it really is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like that. Right? There's a whole other, and we can feel each other's heart. We can feel each other's heart, and like long before we can hear each other's voices. The energy of our heart. I was just reading an article, and I've studied this a lot, but it was just up the other day, so it's right there. We can feel the energy field of our heart, and there's the space between heartbeats has a vibration.
Yeah.
And this is how we can feel this is where our empathy resides, right?
So go on.
Well, so I was really excellent at denying that I had any of those kind of difficult feelings for a long time, and my husband wouldn't put up with it because he was hypersensitive to that kind of thing. And so I'd be like, "No, really, it's fine. No, come on, it's really fine." And then I was upset that he's saying, "No, it's not fine." I can tell it's not fine. So
for me, it used to come out after in the past, after a few drinks. After a few drinks, all of that emotions get triggered, and you see people totally change actually. And you can see that, oh my God, there's so much stuff that they want to let out. And unfortunately, it comes out this way. Sama, I also want to touch on the topic of, while we're talking about anger, it's also about recognizing that the difference between angry, and the righteous anger. Yeah, so what we are not advocating here is like, yeah, let's get angry. Yeah, that's
right.
not our intention. So yeah.
Well, the key for me is, well, the key healing process for me has been to release all the backlog of anger that I didn't even realize I was carrying around with me. That, which, by the way, causes liver stagnation, because our liver is what helps to process our anger. So the process of the liver filtering the blood and creating bile to help digest our food, the richness of life, that anger does the same thing. It filters out the toxins in our lives and creates useful substances to help us receive more nourishment from life. This is the same function of anger is the function of the liver.
Yeah,
and
I
so
just want to break in, and I got reminded of one of my spiritual mentors telling me when I used to have upset stomach, and she would ask me that, okay, so who you have been angry on recently? Let's talk about that. And I'm like, oh no, I thought you were going to talk about what did I eat, because I have upset stomach, and yeah, I just got reminded.
Yeah, and so, digestive distress can be where we're stuffing down that anger and we're not having enough, it's suppressing the functioning of the liver and the other digestive organs, causing inflammation, and heat is often associated with anger. So people who have hot flashes and like that, liver stagnation shows up in menstrual symptoms a lot are about liver stagnation because the blood isn't flowing properly. So, if we, I can't remember your last question now. I was leading towards it, but
sorry to interrupt. But I think what I asked was the difference between just being angry and the righteous anger.
Well, this is so this is the difference. If we have all that backed up anger, then, like I said, we're up to here with anger because we're in denial of it and we're pushing it down in every little thing, and we're just angry at every little thing. And we have no discernment. We're just angry all the time. So that's not really what we're talking about here as far as the healing process. What the healing process needs to be to come to that place where anger is this powerful fuel towards change and growth and creativity and evolution. What we need to do is clear out the old stagnant energy of anger and have an empty vessel so that the anger that arises in any given moment is appropriate for that moment. And if there is a collective big problems like we have today, then each of us can have an appropriate amount of anger to fuel our part in creating the collective change. And we don't have to take on the anger that other people need to have, but to get in touch with the amount of anger that we need to have. And I just want to say that this is a big part of trauma healing as well, getting in touch with our trauma and how it's stored in our body and how it hasn't been resolved and how we're perpetuating the same thing over and over again because our body is addicted to the stress hormones, is right in there with the suppressed anger. And the overflow of constantly getting angry all the time and constantly having anxiety all the time. It usually goes hand in hand, that we're in this stress mode all the time and our liver isn't processing our hormones properly because it's suppressed, and so we've constantly got this out of whack system of hormones flowing through us. So when we clear all that out and have a clear vessel, which, the yoga practices, the breath practices, the qigong practices, the sounding practices. Unfortunately, though, a lot of yoga, qigong, oftentimes is about, it's good to have the soothing and the bringing it down, but it also is really important to let it out in a safe container so that, I found that when I'm doing my regular lion's breath in yoga and clawing and scratching and just getting into letting my body have that angry expression in a safe container by myself, you know, or in a group of people where we're all doing that same thing and everyone knows we're not doing it to each other or at each other, then I don't make passive aggressive comments anymore to my husband.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. What has really worked for me personally, which actually liberated the voice of my anger in a way that is not like a vomit on others, is the use of my sound. As you said, like it's just not the body, the experience of your body, but also the expression of your sound. That this is so crucial to release the anger, and specifically touching those spaces where we feel that there is no anger to begin with. So using our sound activates and helps us to release that. So Sam, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and we can go on and on and on, you know that.
Yes. Well, I just want to say one more thing about the sound that I've learned as I've been exploring this. The sound of our own voice, when we do sounding practices, toning, and I feel even this, especially this growling, I do a lot of wild animal sounds to, you know, get that. I mean, animals naturally express all of that stuff, and there's no sanctions against it, so they don't have PTSD, and they don't have, you know, they don't have passive aggressive, you know, conversations. Anyway, the sound of our own voice helps our body to produce nitric oxide, which is called the pleasure gas or the God gas, and it's a short-lived gaseous substance that our cells and our body produce when we're experiencing pleasure and when we're vocalizing.
Yeah.
And so that gas neutralizes the stress hormones in our body and in our tissues. And those stress hormones get built up in our tissues and are the cause of chronic tension in our muscles and our, you know, tendons and ligaments, and those stress hormones start to eat away at and cause inflammation in our bodies. So people who are in chronic pain, have chronic tension, you know, it's the buildup of stress hormones. So the more we do those vocalizations, we're not only just releasing old stored up anger, but we're also transmuting and neutralizing the stress hormones in our bodies. It's so therapeutic. And so when we're looking to work with the womb rage, for me, it's not about, you know, bringing up a bunch of old traumas and wallowing in that rage. It's actually about identifying that it's there and then transmuting it back into womb bliss. And that bliss is on the other side of just acknowledging that. Whereas the more we suppress that rage and the difficult feelings, the more that bliss and the joy and the love are also suppressed. It's one package. We get it all or nothing.
Exactly. So I like what you're saying about sound specifically, Sama, because I know that that really changes our cellular imprints of our cellular memory, pretty much, of the emotion that we are storing. And of course, we know about the connection between the throat and the yoni, and how doing this womb work using our sound can also open up our throat chakra. And so it's also interconnected. I want to ask you one last question before we close. How do you utilize your womb rage on a regular basis?
Well, I don't know if I would say that I utilize it. What I would say is I've integrated it, or I'm integrating it into my whole experience and my whole purpose. So it becomes an intrinsic part of my purpose in life, and it's ready to give me energy. It's part of the generation of vital energy within me. It's an important part of that generation of energy, and that the healthy flow of fluids through my body and healthy flow of energies through my whole thing. It's the fire in the belly. It's the fire in the dragon's belly, you know, and that fire can be a powerful tool in lots of different situations. I would say that there are certain circumstances where I do utilize rage kind of more explicitly, sort of separating it out, and that's when talking to the phone company or something like that, where you really have to, you know, put your foot down and make sure they know you mean business and like that. Sometimes I'll do that, but I don't usually need to do that to that degree in most of my life. It's much more of an integrated part of the flow of everything that I'm doing. So it's just this constant fire of, you know, we got some work to do here, people. You know, we're in trouble here. We're not going to survive as a species on this planet if we don't get things rolling and get things changing and dismantle some things. And, you know, so it's just a constant get up in the morning and here we go. It's time to do this.
Yeah, we are the women, the midwives, the lighthouse of this new world that we are creating, the way shore for what will come behind us. So it is so important to embrace the totality of all the emotions, the wide range of emotions that our feminine has gifted us with. Thank you so much, Sama, for this conversation and sharing your wisdom, your insights, your experiences. Is there anything in closing that you would like to say before we end our conversation?
Just what came up for me as we were talking about being these way showers and creating this new world. That can seem all big and grandiose and glamorous, and you know, I have all that going on, you know, that being the heroes for the world, right? And what I'm discovering is that it's in the small, everyday, even internal things that we have the opportunity to face and to address. So how have we embodied the detrimental patterns of humanity in our own lives, and how can we find that motivation and that energy to change that, little by little, eroding away at generations old patterns in our DNA and structures. And it's not all, you know, constant bliss or anything like that. It's just get up in the morning and have at it again, you know? So that's what it is. And you know, suppressing, one other thing I wanted to make is that the suppression of anger is one of the root causes of depression. So suppressing anger suppresses all of our emotions, and then we get depressed. And so that's what depression is. Depression is suppression, right? And so I could go on and on about this, but just that my prayer for us is that as we embrace and integrate our anger, that it will fuel more joy and pleasure and bliss, and that be integrated with all of that as the complete picture within us all.
Yeah, and I'm just breathing that in. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to give you a big hug. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy that we had this discussion. And yes, it's the everyday, daily micro choices that we are making. That really matters in these times. And thank you for showing up in your light, Sama.
All right. Thank you, Jonita. Hopefully we'll talk again soon.